So, all right. So good morning. My name is Sheree Lane, and we will I've just got a few. I've got a bit. I've just got a few points to make in opening today's hearing because it's been a little while. It has been the last hearing 3 days in July. So I will touch on that and some other housekeeping matters. So I'm here with fellow co-workers here with and to my left is Dr. Murray Phillips, and to my right is Mr. Stephen Wilson. Independent hearing commissioners. I would just acknowledge the passing of our previous commissioner in the live hearing, Maxine Lyon to the online, who sadly died in August last year. So Mr. Wilson has finally stepped up. About that from a hearing notice sent out on the 24th of February. So apologies for that confusion. And this is also covered in Mr. Malone's legal submission. So just like to make sure everyone's on the same page on that. So we'll take a minute, but I'll just read out the advice that we provided directly to the applicant. And that's the advice in this letter from the Regional Council, and that's the hearing notice, intended to advise that existing original evidence would not be recirculated. So it's all on the website, wasn't intended that that be recirculated. It was not intended to restrict the matters and evidence to be considered at this hearing. The panel has advised that not all evidence, especially where original statements are referenced in the supplementary statements, are available for review and investigation. All that evidence. So we adjourned to get more information, but it was not specific. It was still left the whole application, the whole proposal open for consideration. So it's understood that there are a number of matters, such as discharge point location, that will be the subject of questions from the panel. And that's because that has actually been raised in a response action. So it might be a new matter, but it has been raised by the applicant, and we need to test that a little bit further, just as the heads up. While it's correct that the existing original evidence will not be traversed in detail in this hearing, it will certainly form the basis of questions arising from supplementary information. And in fact, I note that in the applicant's evidence, there is reference to be read in conjunction with the original evidence, as it should be. So clearly, the scope of this hearing is not limited to TCDC, the relates only to the supplementary 42A report. The scope of the hearing remains that for the entire application. So I just wanted to clarify that because there was some confusion with the notice of hearing advice. So that's clear. So the adjournment at the request of the applicant to further address outstanding queries raised during the course of the July hearing. And in particular, that was in relation to environmental effects on the receiving environment and the option of a constructed wetland rather than existing diffusion beds, and that was raised by Ngāti. During this time, acknowledge that TCDC reported on a regular basis to maintain updates, and this is appreciated, engaged with the regional council in the course of this adjournment, and we do appreciate the collaborative approach that's been taken. It's been very useful for us. A summary of where we're now at is provided very usefully in Ms. King's supplementary report in section 2, so I won't repeat that. Thank you, Ms. King, your report's been very useful. The adjournment is required in order to receive additional information, notably the hydrodynamic model and the ecological advice, to better understand effects from the proposed discharge. Review of conditions, including the updated environmental management and monitoring plan, that's also been received and updated. So the application summary is where we are, is to renew the discharge of the Matarangi Wastewater Treatment Plant. A total of 35-year term is being explored with staged compliance proposal. Initially with 5-year status quo and then the 30-year increased volumes and various compliance standards which we'll go through today. It's required to cater for future Matarangi growth, which is largely seasonal, and changes proposed with the treatment plant design and the respective quality parameters, limits and means of measurement. And overall, it's non-compliant. We acknowledge the time that it's taken to get to this point here, both in the original processing and initially being received, which was lodged in 1950. So, it has been a bit of a progress. It was publicly notified in November 2021, and 7 submissions were received, 6 in opposition and 1 in support. So in terms of procedural, I'd just like to check that all information was received. I think that went through Jordan by email and presumably it's up on the website of the council. And that related to there were 12 directions issued by the panel and 19 reports received from the applicant, plus several memorandums. This addressed availability of information and also the setup for this reconvened hearing. There have been received planners report from Ms. King, supplementary 42, and with that specialist memos from the various specialists from the council. Applicant supplementary evidence, there have been 5 statements received and 5 formal statements, and submitted statements, but no expert evidence from Mr. Osborne, Matarangi, Forest and Bird, and Ms. Graham. And more recently, later, but not on the eve, which was the last time around, the legal submissions from the council. I just checked in terms of submissions received. At the last hearing, Auckland Waikato Fishing Game submission withdrew the need to be heard. It was my understanding that the submission still remained, but they did not need to be heard, subject to acceptance of a condition and alien botulism that had subsequently been provided and is covered in proposed condition 46G. So read the conditions of the I just note there that it's referred to as AMP. We shouldn't get that confused with the adaptive management plan, so there's a couple of AMPs going on there. So I would confirm that the application remains within scope. We touched on this last time, but some changes have been made, proposed to be made, leading up from July 24 to here. And that's addressed in the supplementary 42A report as well. That's on pages 7 and 8. And that was being, as I understand it, no tidal discharge, tidal cycle discharge, and updated conditions in the environmental management monitoring plan structure with the adaptive management plan. So those changes we've discussed in our executive as they in scope in the application. The three of us did our site visit yesterday, and thank you to Mr. Tony Connell, who was there on site on a Sunday, and was very helpful and provided us access to the site. Nairi and I had been obviously previously, but Stephen hadn't, so it was really useful to have a recap and see where things are currently. We walked up the drain as we had done before, and walked around the site, saw what is the plant at the moment. In that regard, we confirm that this application is for the discharge consent. It's not for the location and operation of the plant, which is under a designation. So I know that's been raised previously at the hearing in July 24, but just confirm that our assessment and our consideration is around the renewal and discharge. Now, some housekeeping matters. Mr. Nick is our hearings advisor and point of contact to run through hearing protocols shortly, and a number of council advisors in attendance, and someone called, I think Ms. Mel is online. Yes, so there's a few others. And when, presumably tomorrow, we have some questions for Ms. Mel, and she's presenting. She'll be available, but good that she's here to get through the days, so I appreciate that. Thank you. And from TCPC, got water quality, Mr. Cochrane, wastewater engineering, Mr. Dishnathi, ecology, Ms. McIntosh, hydro and available modelling, Mr. Filter, and planning, Mr. Crowcroft. So we'll all introduce and go through that. So I'll just check before I go through the hearing procedures, check those present in terms of submitters. Would you like to just?
Yeah, right.
Thank you, Nick. Is that no? So who have we got present here?
Kia ora koutou, I'm Michael Doe, Communications Team Leader at Wastewater District.
Oh, thank you. And so could you just introduce yourself? Sorry.
I'm sorry, Fiona McIntosh.
Oh, sorry. Okay.
Yeah, because I don't speak.
Sorry, Fiona. Apologies.
Relegated to the
Thank you. And just council, do you want to just introduce yourselves? That would be useful at the beginning.
Yeah,
So
sure.
who's here?
I'm Amy King, we've got Dr. Susan Hunt and Dr. here. Juliet Lynn is back online, and just for clarity, the other two people you see online, we've got Luke and Taylor. They are my team, they're juniors who are serving for apprenticeship development.
Hello everyone, I'm Ahmed Diaz and I'm the Group Manager for Infrastructure at the Organization Council and the Wastewater activities inside my portfolio. And I was at the last.
Yes, but no supplementary evidence.
Not today.
Yeah.
I will wait there for
Okay.
Thank you.
Frank Mr. I'm the Water Services Manager for TCPC. I obviously operate and maintain a wastewater treatment.
Yes, I'm a project manager with the council too, and I've been involved in this process since 2015.
Yeah. Do you want to just quickly go over so that everyone knows?
Sure. So, Julian Sokoloff, Magdalene, Simon Berry, Hans Dispenda, Helicopter,
Yes. Thank you very much. So, to conclude, there's been a supplementary 42A report, and the original was, actually dated June. The recommendation is to grant consent to discharge permit, subject to acceptance by the applicant of a suite of conditions. That's the position we're at today, as I understand it. And note that those condition amendments are detailed in section 7.2 of this supplementary 42A report. Any discussion about conditions? I would just caveat that is without prejudice. We have to test all aspects of the application, and that critically includes conditions. So it doesn't mean to say that we have, we have a determination, but we do have to test the conditions. There's no cross-examination, communications through myself as chair, and the applicant has the right to reply after submitters and council advisors have presented. At the moment we have, as I say, sit down for 3 days, and you do have, hopefully, a copy of the schedule that Jordan would have circulated. We've got today set down for the applicant and submitters tomorrow, and council response and evidence on tomorrow afternoon, maybe up through Wednesday. But it's good, I think, to have that 3 days so we don't run out of time. And I know from Mr. Maloney and his legal submissions that he's looking at the right of replies are written after next week. We can get to that. I have mentioned to Jordan the lunch break is only set at half an hour. We're a little bit nothing immediately available, so I think seeing how we're going, I haven't got a morning and afternoon tea break set. We might extend that to an hour. It's more logical. We'll see how we're going. So hopefully that covers everything that's been nearly 2 years since we worked together. So I thought it was just useful to give that update and background as to the rest of the hearing. Would you like to introduce yourself? Sarah? Just, we did previously as who we are.
Kia ora koutou. So it is 2 years ago, still being constituted transfiguration. I am from Waikato, as well. And some years as a result of my area of I do have a general science in making a background, but my specific area is related to and it had quite a bit of experience sort of engaging in work, basically currently involved in I knew mix what it was, right? Shared period and into role was a bit trial infrastructure, and she is the daughter in Greenwood of key shapes that move the vision towards the south space. Those who don't know, kind of a weird passed away the day after the evening of the mother's on pain in my life. So, still together there, what a great place to live.
Thank you. No, you're not. No. I was quite ecologist, both in Margaret Towns, Equal Place to Live. We've sort of been involved in this for quite some time, and I've been here as Commissioner for 2015, but later in the last 5 years, we've done a lot. And now kind of a somewhat experienced Commissioner nowadays. Right. Thank you for listening. And we'll hand over to you, Mr. Or the Spirit, because yes, it's not quite much.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I normally understand to present people's questions, but I think as it is, it would be appropriate to be a little bit over there. So these are apologies for the lateness of these being circulated, but of course we considered that it was most helpful for the panel if we could organise some rebuttal evidence rather than have that face about being here and you can't write just submissions for the evidence. Again, apologies for the lateness. This may seem like quite a tome, but really what we've attempted to do is to pull together our story in the order in which we think it most logically flows, and put the eyes out of the evidence in the way that we hope will be most helpful for you during your deliberations. So I don't need to read it all, but I'll just literally turn the page on it. Because much of what, because I was conscious, we were conscious in the drafting this, that there had been quite a bit of water under the bridge, and it was quite important to put context around where we're at now. So the front end of this states the obvious in terms of what we're doing here. Captures the information that was submitted in October last year, which we don't need to read, and we're particularly grateful for the thoroughness of Ms. King's report in terms of putting all that material together as well. It's a very excellent document. Amy and I just reminded each other that the first time we really worked together was on Matarangi back in 2007.
That was me.
Wasn't intended to be, it was intended to signal just how much respect we have for her and how much experience she has. The supporting material that we have produced in order to assist you. Firstly is the table that was submitted when we submitted the legal submissions. We had originally created that, making a distinction between the not raised at the first hearing and raised later. In the end, it's a distinction without a difference, and it's all just there in order to have it listed rather than to send it all out here, just as a ready reference. Secondly, there's a flash drive with, and we were just discussing this, the images that are used in the evidence. So basically, every graphic, so it's not intended necessarily to refer to everyone, but if we would have a question that assists by referring to the graphic, we can just flash it up. And if you're anything like me as commissioners, I always end up with sort of 2 or 3 pet plans that I like to come back to, and rather than have you tear it out of the evidence so it's on the table, we've given you what we think is most useful. You want to just take through those pages?
Very quickly, given this time.
I
have improvised given the length of the table. So the copies that are sitting on those chairs over there, each of the plans is
yeah, that's fine.
so, and they're all from the indices of evidence. So the first one is that one, and that's attached to Mr. Cochrane's document evidence. That's great. That one attached to Mr. Cochrane's Then we've got this one here, which is from Mr. Coulter's evidence, and that's just showing you the modelling sequence and I think they want to ask some questions about that. And this one here is index list Macintosh evidence, and we thought that might be helpful because it's showing these key areas here with a model indicator that previously that was going there. And the last but not least is this, and that is an attachment to both Mr. Coulter's evidence and Mr. Cochrane's evidence, and that addresses the following scenarios and likelihood of outcomes, efficiency and concentrations, taking into account a range of factors, and I'm sure that Mr. Coulter and Mr. Cochrane do a good job of explaining that to you like that.
You. So it would be a bit of a journey to actually go through these submissions from start to finish. And what I'm requesting in 1.6 is that we cover the first sections 2 to 5 from the script, but then we're then into the discrete areas that are covered by the evidence. What I propose to do is present that part of the submissions, then hand to witness. We've found that it's less boring and it works. Yes. And to that extent, the first 3 witnesses are 1, 2, 3 to my right, so that they're all set. And then once we get on to ecology, Ms. Macintosh can vacate the cheap seats and come and sit up here. So procedural context, I think that I've just highlighted there what seemed to be a source of confusion. It's no problem to us. I mean, in accordance with that direction, the supplementary evidence did focus on developments since the adjournment. That's not as a result of the hearing direction, it's a result of what we needed to cover. So the 5 witnesses who have given supplementary evidence are set out there in 2.5. Just noted in 2.4 that we accept all issues on the table, and all of our witnesses have gone back to their original evidence, reviewed that again, and are ready to answer questions on any aspect.
With 2.4, that just used to be received clarification, is that 26th of March?
Yeah, sorry.
Okay, that's fine.
Sorry about that. So there are the 5 witnesses that we've introduced this morning. Section 2 of each of those statements has a little summary, so that if you wanted them to we can either go straight into questions or they can present a summary if that would be assistance to you, but that's why it's there.
I could maybe it's a summary.
Yeah, it's always
Yeah, that's sort of why it's there, so that we're not coming in absolutely cold. So all of those witnesses presented evidence in July 2024. Peter Quilter didn't. He's the second to my right. He's our modelling guru, so that's why he's here. And Mr. Imtiaz gave evidence first time up. We're on the 2.9, and there was no need for supplementary because of the sort of general background, but he's here to answer any questions as well. And all of this obviously needs to be seen alongside everything else that was in the 2024 hearings. So there's absolutely no difference of view between us and you in relation to that. We don't propose to seek to reply this week because there's likely to be a bit of technical material and further work on commissions that will flow out of this. and whether we ask for 5 or 10 working days, I'll talk to my team, but of course I'm very aware that a lot of people take it time at Easter, and that's this week.
I think whatever time it is, it's required at this point
Yes.
to cover things off.
So, I mean, I really raised that in case the panel wants to signal any constraints about what time we, in the last period I did actually reply, so quite smart, so that the decision could be written before our chair went overseas. They'll probably be particularly not at the moment. This is quite cheap accommodation, at least at the moment. And supplementary section 42A report, as we've said, we've endorsed that as a thorough and insightful and professional piece of work, which is a credit to Ms. King. We are nevertheless requesting some amendments to be made to conditions which represent recognised best practice in relation to the implementation of the adaptive management regime that lies at the heart of TCDC's approach. And that essentially is where we sit as between what sits as hard and fast conditions and what goes to the EMP directed by conditions. Just notice here there's submissions that were originally lodged and so forth, and you've done that, so that's fine. 4 of those submitters have filed further material, and the witnesses listed in 217 have done rebuttal to that as well. And there I refer to that table. There has been a petition. We say nothing other than to the extent that it seeks an alternative discharge location. That's not within the scope of the application. Remind that the planning's got a numbers game, and there are legal authorities to say that the RMA is sort of headcount exercise, and of course the petition is obviously signed by people who aren't submitters, but I'll leave that to you.
I'll address that now. Mr. Metz did advise us that there was a petition. We have not seen it or investigated it. I don't know who is on that petition or what it is. Unless there's submitters, then it's not part of the party to this hearing.
Yeah.
I would just note that any submitter does have an opportunity to call as a witness any other party. That may be something that is available to him, but otherwise the petition is outside the jurisdiction of this hearing.
Appreciate that, Susan. The relevant statute and plan principles, we'd originally done a reasonably comprehensive chapter on this, and then when I looked again at the opening legal submission last time, I thought there was absolutely no point in going over that ground again. There's been some amendments, legislative and policy amendments since, which has covered both in Ms. King's report and in Ms. Crocroft's evidence. And I don't think there's anything in any of that makes such a significant difference that we need to address you on. So I'd be happy to pull out the other submissions and take you through them, but what I'd rather do is leave it with you to raise any issues that arise out of that. Of course, the legal authorities in relation to depth management and so forth weren't covered in detail last time, but are addressed in the other parts of the submissions which that issue arises.
Yes, thank you for that discussion. We have looked through it, we've read through it, and we do at the end have some questions on that, and we'll allude to that when appropriate.
Sure. And the environmental management regime, of course, does lie at the heart of the implementation of that adaptive management regime. You will have no doubt benefited from Ms. King's regarding explanation of adaptive management, section 5. Like that, the purpose of this section is to provide a brief overview of the adaptive management regime proposed. The adaptive management regime relies on collection of data from monitoring, etc., to make decisions about management, including the appropriate times for triggers to be activated and so forth. One of the only remaining points of contention between WRC and TCDC is where the balance should be struck between the conditions of the EMP, conditions and the EMP in that regard. WRC's preferences are particularly included in the conditions, TCDC's preferences of the hard and fast requirements in terms of outcomes are contained in conditions for the flexible mechanisms such as triggers are included in the EMP so that they can be amended and improved knowledge via mechanisms provided for within the conditions rather than having the whole section 127 change the conditions process. So at the end of the day, while there are some matters identified in Ms. King's report that need to be clarified, the fundamental approach is accepted because of adaptive management and really we're talking about moving the furniture. So I think the important point to note is that there's an acceptance by the Regional Council that adaptive management is appropriate, that it's appropriate to make a decision about adaptive management now on the basis of the information that's available. That the information that may be a bit short at the moment will be generated in the next few years in terms of creating a solid baseline, but that the balance between conditions and the EMP is a matter of preference, and one which ultimately you will decide on the year.
I just note that as a heads up, that will be quite a bit of our investigation.
Yes.
And just where you've got those flexible mechanisms.
Yes.
I've just got a question noted on your legal submissions. Doesn't have to be answered right now, but why are triggers seen as flexible mechanisms? So that's sort of, if someone can answer that at some stage, that would be useful.
Sure. Well, I think the answer to that is that triggers can be changed if in light of the knowledge. That's what flexibility means there. And it's a question of the process by which the change is made, whether that's Section 127 process or a process defined by the conditions that enables via and what Ms. King's report talks about is the certification process. But there could be something more substantive than a certification process that doesn't necessarily need to lead to a Section 127 process, which obviously brings to business and everything else. We're really talking about highly technical information. I think Ms. Crowcroft is the person to those issues.
Can I just say, just adding to that, I would still have questions about that why they need to be flexible, but why they need to be changed, and that's quite a technical question.
Yes. So, yeah, and Mr. Cochran also would be well qualified to be doing that, and Mr. Cochran way. So we refer to the Pluri Commission in which the management plan contains the triggers rather than the conditions. So that's not to say that it would be unlawful to put them in the management plan, but it's clearly and acknowledged to be misleading. So I don't think we need to go through this in any detail. It does just walk us through the aspects of the conditions that set the environmental monitoring and management plan up. Needs to be started in 3 months. Has to be prepared by a site, suitably qualified experienced scientists, probably called Mr. Cochran. Condition 22 requires the EMP to include the title, extra monitoring and so forth. And that again, continuing generation of quality information is a key aspect of adaptive management, and that is what's contemplated. That will provide baseline data in relation to specific areas of the receiving environment that the modelling indicates could potentially be at risk from nitrogen in the discharge. Condition 22 requires the EMP to contain triggers that are referred to there, and the need for an initial and final response plan. So the rest of that, I will take it through this there really for you to come back to and if you need to. And the MMP is produced as part of Mr. Cochrane's evidence, and the EMP sets out the following recommendation of adaptive management, and I obviously don't need to read that unless you'd like me to.
We'll get there.
Yes. Then it was most efficient to refer to the supplementary section 42A report in relation to this material, and we submit that Ms. King's report correctly identifies the Sustain Our Sounds King Salmon decision as the leading authority on the setting of criteria for adaptive management, and the criteria are set out in those paragraphs that we've highlighted there. And again, unless you want me to, I don't think they need to be read. As Chief Justice Preston said, adaptive management is not a second approach. Ms. King's report evaluates whether adaptive management is appropriate in the context of whether the proposed framework provides sufficient certainty, and we highlight there the passage that says that treatment advisors consider that a robust adaptive management framework could manage or reduce the remaining uncertainty. Such uncertainty is not unusual in the context of dry environments where ecological responses.
It's good. It looks just cool.
Oh, that's
Wonderful. I'm not really the technical content
right.
Then, and for 418, we just go on to address the reasonable assurance test, and Ms. King noted that she considers the amendments. The amendments are required to impose conditions to ensure the criteria are met, but ultimately concludes that, and that's got no underlining in it because we think the whole passage is very important. Overall, I consider that consent can be decided by the information available. The effects of the interim period prior to the commissioning of the new farm are sufficiently understood, and the expected improvement in nutrient loads after commissioning provides a reasonable certainty about the general direction of ecological change. The form of adaptive management is appropriate for the period following commissioning, and to the extent that it allows carefully managed depth increases in discharge by the associated contaminant load remonitoring demonstrates that defined ecological thresholds being met and are likely to continue to be met. The adaptive management, the adaptive component must be tightly bound as enforceable and proportionary. We don't disagree with any of that. So Ms. King concludes that the adaptive management is appropriate in this specific context, but only within the robust threshold-based framework which we submit the conditions that we have produced, and which may still be subject to further discussions. And hearings are very handy for that. Does that. And then I just refer to Ms. Crowcroft's evidence, which you've obviously read, and again, this is there for completeness. So I won't take you through that. Our submission is that, I'm at 423 now, we submit that the panel can be satisfied and can find that all the criteria for adaptive management for an adaptive management regime are met. It's more than adequate evidential foundation for the panel to have reasonable assurance that the adaptive management approach will sufficiently reduce uncertainty and adequately manage the remaining risk. The extent of the environmental risk is small, and the gravity of any consequences if the risk is realised are also small. Wastewater discharges from the existing and new plant is extremely important to the well-being and health and safety of the Matarangi community. And it might be added there that it's quite clear that while the wastewater discharge is easily identifiable, it's only a very small proportion of the nitrogen that ends up in that estuary. Proposed adaptive management regime will sufficiently diminish the uncertainty risk, and the management regime proposed, including the TCDC's amendments, is appropriate and represents precautionary approach. So I think the detailed conversation we're going to want to have in relation to the mechanics and the technical basis for the EMP will be probably first with Mr. Cochran and then with Mr. Prokop. But obviously we can address any legal issues. The legal issues themselves are quite straightforward in this context, and there's no disagreement there. Turning now to multi-cultural and spiritual considerations, we readily acknowledge the very long association with Ngāti Tuariri Ki Whakakoa with the locality of the application site and the surrounds and their special role as patriarchy in the context of the resource management process. In that regard, we note that cultural statement filed by the British from the Ngāti Tuariri Ki Whakakoa Trust refers to her unbroken ancestral connection to Whakakoa and her representing 700 years of Pākehā at Whakakoa. The Section 22A report notes the 3.2 that's expected that our supplementary limits will address the position, and that's covered in Ms. Crowcroft's evidence of addresses post-hearing engagement, noting that a workshop took place that enabled co-design and the concept of a moulding restoration area, and Ms. Crowcroft will take you through that. Your understanding is that the concept of the MRA is acceptable to Ngāti Tuariri, and that is designed to be a collaborative effort, and as a condition of consent requiring TCDC to use reasonable endeavours to facilitate engagement in that regard. Obviously, we can't impose an obligation on Ngāti Tuariri themselves, but that condition was not included in the evidence outlined there. And the cultural statement is set out there, which I don't propose to read unless you'd like me to. It does seek that the consideration be reduced from 35 years to 15, with a view to transitioning to land-based disposal, and Ngāti Tuariri does not support any further connections to the treatment plant, the ones already consented. But I think the important point there is that the number of connections, the number of further connections that can be made to the plant is absolutely finite, and will be, I think this is 180. So that's that, due to, obviously the technical constraints.
So that 180 is from when? Is
I've made a note.
few months later.
Yes, we've done a study, and it's basically from the 1st of July last year. The post we have were for 1,820 service of all lots, which means there's only 180 more service of all lots that can be put on board.
When you say getting more, we now drove through the council with what was going on, and you saw a lot of really difficult positions here. So is that additional planning include those into our structure, how to build on, or is that in addition to what we do?
That's the lots there that are. We made provision for 1,800 for the developer, and then we allowed for another potential 100 or maybe 200 of development on the golf course as well. So there was some talk early in the day of the golf course reverting back to a 9-hole golf course, so there was potential for another 100 sections there. So that 2,000 was set a long time ago, and it includes the current development that is there.
But is it your submission where not really derived between what we've developed south of us, but turned around and north and south was here, but it doesn't, chief opinion on if it's south of what is currently on the golf course account and the book of the town office. Is there going to be an issue or constraint by the technical capacity of the plant?
Fully constrained by the technical capacity of the plant. If somebody goes out towards the state highway, for instance, and wants to develop out there, they have to have their own wastewater treatments. It won't be designed and power plant, it's got 2,000 lots. That's it.
I think, thank you for those questions, Commissioner, because I think it's really important. The numbers I wrote down when we had a conversation yesterday was of 2,000, there's 1471 connected. 319 that are paying the rate but are not yet connected. That is 180. So that's, we've got an absolute cap there. Development from the south is not something that, just to repeat that, that would be contemplated as being serviced by the plant.
Just to explore that a little bit more, it's just useful at this point. Under 1471 connected, that's the whole of Matarangi residential area. Yes, it's not just the sort of more recent, newer developments.
That's currently what's the rating projects that are currently.
Thank you.
So I think we've been really brief in relation to this because we obviously, nobody can speak for nothing good except them, and we wish to address, issues in relation to those connections and so forth. I mean, our position is quite clear on that. If there's anything else, then we can deal with that live, or as you direct us to during the hearing. Turning now to wastewater engineering, again, as we've done this throughout this commission, you address first the section supplementary 42A report, and we're going to get to read 62. Ms. King notes that TCDC is indicating throughout the current process that storage will be available once the new plant is operating. If storage is required to not discharge volumes. Ms. King has included condition 6 in the draft conditions relating to the sealing of the ponds. There's been no expert evidence filed by submitters in relation to this issue, and all this does is refer you to the supplementary evidence that Mr. Deshpande, immediately to my right, has given, and again, he will present this evidence. We've just set out here I took the right submissions with the view to seeing you sitting at the relations table, so hoping this will help more later than it does now. But that's the conclusion of the supplementary evidence that I won't read out to you. The rebuttal evidence or best statements by submitters in relation to the management of peak flows at the upgraded Matarangi plant and the circumstances relevant to the advisory which was issued in January of this year, which a comment was requested on, and that's TCDC's comment through Mr. Deshpande, but also TCDC asked many questions about that issue. The bottom line is that there isn't a treatment plant in the country that's designed to deal with the 1 to 250 megawatts or something that hardly occurs. And there wouldn't have been many treatment plants in the country that would have handled that throughout that period. And it's something obviously that's changing.
despite what people like President Trump climate change. So our submission is that given the assessments and conclusions in the report and the mandate evidence, you will be satisfied and compliant that both WTP will be state of the art and will operate within appropriate discharge flow limits and stringent discharge quality limits that are comparable to the other state of the art wastewater treatment plants in New Zealand. All the codes are reasonably cleaning fluid will be available after commissioning, which required over the summer period. Use of storage is entirely feasible and consistent with the adaptive management framework, and adequate heat flow management can be incorporated into the new plant by smart hydraulic engineering, instrumentation and controls. So that's the point at which I would like to step back and sort of the entree for the questions to Mr. Peter.
Are you going to read this summary?
Yeah.
I thought that was going to be the starting point. Is that right?
Yes, that's fine. No. Yeah.
The two people comfortable. Can everyone hear okay still?
I was going to say, what might want to...
Both speaking off usually outside voice.
Sounds like having a ruckus next door.
You can get a billboard at that time.
Okay, thank you for this opportunity. Since the initial hearing, 2024, there was quite a bit of discussion at the hearing after that on discharge flows and loads, and there were 3 technical matters that were raised, and after the hearing we did some more analysis and investigation on those questions. So the 3 technical issues were, one was the use of ultraviolet disinfection for virus protection. So there's a memo I submitted based on that. The other one was comparison of future flows and loads with what the existing plant is doing and what it will do in future. And then the third one was having a limit in the condition on average annual discharge flows. So I went away and we did some more investigation on those 3 matters. I'll just summarize my memos. So in terms of the UV process for virus reduction, it is the proposed biological nutrient plant. It's a secondary treatment plant. So secondary treatment plant along with the UV does more than 99.9% reduction in viruses. And it's well proven. I've got evidence there from Ponderoa, and all the plants that we now design are based on those figures. The future flows and loads, so there was a discussion on how much particularly the nutrient loads will increase in the future compared to now. So I looked at about 4 scenarios, and we were looking summaries. Yeah.
Okay.
Do you want me to read the whole?
No. Yes. Speaking to us. Sorry.
Yeah. So I looked at four scenarios, and the focus was on the peak period because the plant will be designed for the peak period, increased flows and loads during the peak period. So we looked at all kinds of permutation and combination of flows and discharge. When I say discharge, I looked at the scenario of, you've got that table up there, which has got a median value on the 95th percent, should be 95th percentile, now it's changed to 95th. So I looked at a scenario where if you consider the peak period,
then maybe the Christmas New Year week, you might say that the plant performs to delivers a higher total nitrogen value than the medium because there's higher loads coming through, which is not. The plant will be designed to produce less than about the median. But I'm taking a scenario where if it doesn't, if it's higher. So that kind of scenario. And then I also looked at other scenarios where I have the scenario 4, which is the extended summer, which is looking at the 155 days, right from 1st of December to the 30th of April. So various flows, the permutation and combination of flows and loads. Now, out of the 4 scenarios, in my opinion, scenario 3 and 4 are the most likely scenarios. Scenario 3 talks about during the fortnight of 23rd December, between 23rd December and the 15th February, I've considered the 95 percentile concentrations. And also the Auckland anniversary and Waitangi weekend. And then the rest of the peak period, which is outside that, I've considered the lower median concentration, nutrient concentrations. So the flows and loads coming out of the Christmas.
The few panels hasn't everybody followed. If you read the summary, Mr. that's actually referring to chapter 5.
I was in supplementary, I think, flows and loads 2.34.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, all, I think
Okay. Sorry.
That's who you're comparing to?
I was referring to the overview, which is the next section, but I can come back.
Oh, okay. No,
That's
what we're
yeah. So, as I said, scenario 3, I consider it's most likely scenario 3 or 4, and so based on that, the increase in total nitrogen. So this is at the top of page 4.
What paragraph number are you at?
2.6. So the increase in total, under that scenario, the increase in total nitrogen. So what I did was I compared that with the years from 2020 to 2024. So I looked at that period and compared that with future. So my analysis based on that was the TN loads will actually have a negative 23% to 15%, and the total phosphorus will increase by 22 to 47%. So I consider that 15% TN load, that's about right. But this is loads in terms of concentrations. The concentration will be lower than what it is currently.
And that's simply because of the improved technology.
Yes. And then the discharge flow, which is paragraph 2.8. So did some analysis on looking at the last 5 years data, what flows we get in terms of dry weather flows when there's no rain, and then there's precipitation greater than 10 mils. So an analysis of that, and then plus factoring rainfall on the ponds and the diffusion beds, plus adding some safety margin of 15%, we arrived at an annual average discharge flow limit of 885 cubics per day, which was not offered before. So that's why we're doing this. Then paragraph 2.9. So based on evidence of Mr. Cochrane, I understood that the wastewater storage may be, treated wastewater storage may be required after construction of the new plant over the peak summer for up to 7 days under certain conditions to minimize the adverse effects of the discharge. So such storage is quite possible. The advantage is we have our ponds, so we don't have to construct new facilities. We can repurpose those ponds to use them for that function if required. So I did, so previously those limits were 90th percentile, and based on discussions, we are okay with that being 95th percentile. And then if we are using the ponds, then the ponds will need to be lined, and I support that, so line the ponds accordingly. So that was the supplementary evidence, and now
Would you like
Yeah.
Governor Simon as well?
The questions you've got now on that. I think so, because the rebuttal was mainly in terms of the facility, so I think, yeah, we'll pick off this. Well, or, unless you want to.
I've got three questions. I don't feel like this will be asked someone
yeah.
So I'm not including expertise today or technician in the something that I took place to be prepared the plan. Our observation was, I don't know where you do it now, but I was curious as to what you say about stipulated and sugar.
So as I understand, at this point, there is no such plan of putting septic tanks into the plant.
Because would that, if it was, presumably that would change the numbers, wouldn't it?
That would change the numbers in the influence, and that would then, the plant would be designed accordingly to cater for that increase.
So that you'd have to make that decision before the plant is on.
Yes.
More. And we supplementary again, as well as a annual maximum load. Annual maximum total discharge for along the daily proposed limits. What do you say?
Sorry, I didn't
So
understand.
there's a day, I think it's something else, kind of 50 cube or something like that, up to 2200 cube. And what really if submitted is that along with those daily should be annual total limit.
On the
Annual total discharge.
Sorry, now I need to leave out one of this type of the question. I think that in the submission, in the supplementary, we talk about annual limit. In the supplementary, the paragraph 26. I just annual total discharge. Paragraph 27,
So currently we have average annual discharge, which is at 85 tons per day.
They've done 21.
for 2 days?
We have this, so there is an average annual discharge. So over a 365 days, we have a limit, 885. And then we have a limit of 2,200 maximum discharge. Oh! So we have the 2,200 cubes per day, which is the maximum discharge. So we have that. We have that.
But it's only during the peak period. So,
And it's 1,100 during the
yes, so I just picking up on
Which would equate to an annual, you check it out to your annual.
That's the 885 average annual discharge.
That's per day.
So that-
Are you saying over the whole year, 365?
No, it's just calculating and made that point there, they would like to see an annual maximum total discharge.
These, in my opinion, these 3 values, which are pretty standard, have been used all over. And this covers all the lessons of the discharge. And that is why, as I said before, we didn't have that 885 figure before, but discussions at WRC, we did the analysis and we have now have
Which is so the average
average of all year.
of the whole year, taking into account the peak of first and the start season of the.
Yes.
It's just, well, it's more of a, about the concern with the, school meetings.
Yeah.
And listen to the whole time, that they keep pretty high when I'm, can you hear me okay? This like, dude, come on. The concern about being able to compromise the school.
Yeah.
And that's why we support everything. Yeah. And understand it. Other than that, 1 to 250, extreme events, which is cost prohibitive, and we're in to provide for. Would you submit the current proposed design will provide for those storm events?
So the proposed design will cover peak wet weather flows, just normal peak wet weather flows. Any plant is designed to handle peak wet weather flows. So, and there will be that figure. But anything exceeding that peak wet weather flow will be stored. So there will be automatic controls in the plant with instrumentation, smart hydraulics, that anything exceeding that peak wet weather flow will be diverted to a contingency lagoon. And then when the storm dies, it will be pumped back into the treatment plant and then treated. So that's all it is. Now, 1 in 250 here, in my opinion, I mean, no plant in the world is designed for that kind of, that kind of an event, because you are, as I said in my evidence, it is cost prohibitive. It is analogous to having a 5-car garage, but using only 1 car, and sometimes using 5 when there are guests. So you have to maintain, operate, and maintain all that infrastructure for nothing, for no purpose. And also they invest in all the capital to handle that kind of a flow. So no plant does that. But the point is that today we are only allowed to discharge 650 cubes per day. Yeah, but in future it will be more. So you have 3 things going for you. One is you're allowed to discharge more. Your plant is a better mechanical plant that can handle hydraulic flows. Plus you have the contingency. plant design, which will be designed to handle peak wet weather flows. The other thing is contingency lagoon.
And then you can discharge more.
And I can discharge water.
So can I just follow on from that? So you say the design, I know this hearing is not about the design,
Yeah.
but it is relevant to us in understanding how effects will be managed, I guess. So it is important for us to talk a little bit about the design in terms of, and you said that it was designed for peak wet weather flow. And it just occurred to me that this question about whether, and maybe it relates more to infiltration, that, how does the plant, because it's going to, the flow that you're talking about is actually the flow of wastewater.
Yes.
So how does it accommodate rain?
Right.
You've got a very heavy event, very high rainfall.
Yeah.
How is that accommodated within your discharge, your peak period flow, maximum flow rate?
How does the plant handle it?
Well, how is that accommodated in that number? Or is that accommodated in that number?
So peak wet weather flow, we'll look at, so generally in New Zealand, and depending on the catchment, the peak wet weather flow factor is about 3 to 5 times the average driver flow.
Sorry, 3 to 5.
3 to 5 times the average driver flow.
Right.
So when it's not raining, what the flow is, the peak wet weather flow is about 3 to 5 times. So, and each catchment is different. Yeah, like we're constructing the Pyro, which we're not at this stage. The peak there is about 6, 7, 8. So every catchment is different. So we look at all the data attachments and then decide on that number. So based on that, the plant is designed taken hydraulically.
Okay.
And also, INI is a good point. I have mentioned this in one of my reports, is that we know TCDC, I understand TCDC has a program to look at INI initiatives. So that will certainly help.
And just in terms of storage, when we were at the plant yesterday, I stepped to there would be sludge in one of the ponds.
Yes.
Probably work moment.
Yes.
So I was just interested to know, I mean, with the current pond line, which you said they were with clay,
Yeah.
and I guess the proposed condition is that they line the pond. So would it be relined with clay, or I mean, is the integrity of the lining now an issue?
So, so there are 2 ways you can do that. One, you can reinstall the clay liner, and the other way you can do that is install a PE liner, or polyethylene liner.
And is there a benefit?
As long as the seepage or whatever that minimum seepage to the ground, whatever that we design to that, whatever is specified.
And just in terms of storage, I guess again, yeah, I mean, we understand that there is a lot of storage in those 2 system ponds, it's not going to be used as part of the system going to the post-commission. But again, in terms of working out how much storage you need, and given this recent storm event as an example, and things like Cyclone Gabrielle, which are beginning to become more frequent, how have you calculated these sort of scenarios into your calculations of how much storage you need?
So that will be part of the design. We haven't designed the plant.
Yeah.
We know it's about.
No, that, sorry to interrupt, but I guess again, in terms of our ability to assess effects, if storage, and that is actually one of the things in the environmental management plan, is storage. So we need to be confident that the amount of storage that is needed is available, and also that the calculations for the amount of storage take these sorts of things into account.
As much as they can.
Yeah, as much as they can. Appreciate
Yes.
it.
Yeah.
But in terms of, I mean, you've got numbers around how much discharge you're likely to have, and then you've got some times, and you've got some scenarios about what the rainfall in the future might look like.
Yeah.
Yes. So that's kind of where I'm coming from.
Yeah. So given those ponds, they and you know, there's the surrounding area, there is enough storage available, and we will design, the plant will be designed so that the maximum use of that, you know, the storage ponds will be made. So yeah, and that's pretty cool. Like I mentioned, Pyroa, wastewater plant. Pyroa currently has got 3 ponds, and now they're building a new MBR plant, which is commissioned next month. That we're using one of the ponds for peak flow storage. That's exactly the mechanism that I just talked about. Exactly. Hydraulically, excess flows until a peak. And then, so we have done all those calculations based on it. So the plant is designed so that, you know, the storage is utilized optimally.
Is it common practice to use existing ponds, you know, once you build a new one?
Yeah. So the you know, we talk about using, you know, oxidation bond, and we have to go technology, and that's fine. We have to move to modern technology. But the advantage we have is that we've got those bonds, and you know, for exactly that kind of event. Now, so we are upgrading magnifying wastewater as we speak. We're doing the design for it. They have a balance tank made of concrete balance tank. So they have to use that. They don't have con. So that's the advantage we have at Matarangi.
Just while we're on the storage, at 7.7 of your supplementary evidence, wastewater storage, you've got as regards storage, 1 or more of the existing ponds can be repurposed for storage of treated effluent required, which is what we're talking about. My question there, what does it require mean? And would it be prudent to do this at the outset in your design to ensure that it's available as a response item? I mean, if you've got those ponds there, repurposing them after an event is not going to help.
No.
Yeah.
It will have to be identified and designed. Yes.
So what does the if required mean?
If required means depends on the ecological circumstances. So that's as Mr. Cochran's evidence. If that is required.
Oh.
During those.
So you
so
that input into your design.
Yes.
So would it be appropriate to say, if required, to achieve ecological that?
So I'm not an ecological expert, so I wouldn't say that.
Yeah. Oh, right.
You could probably say it.
Yeah. Yeah. So I will.
I understand.
Yeah.
But wouldn't you, well, I think you've already just said this, you would actually include them as a problem.
Yes.
You would include them regardless of what the potential events are going to be.
Yeah.
Because it's a contingency.
Yeah, that's one. Yeah, so we will design, it will be designed into the configuration of the whole. Yes.
Otherwise, it's not.
No, otherwise it would be a problem.
With the modelling now undertaken and the updated information available from that, for instance, the tidal flow mechanisms, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
What is the impact, what changes would you see to the wastewater design as it would affect the discharge parameters now? So will the information that is now available, has that changed the design parameters?
So it works the other way. I will design my plan to go there.
Okay, so that information has come through now
Yes.
over the last 18 months.
Yes, that has not. So those parameters that we have set in
So the limit is treatment, these are the treatment limits.
Yes.
They won't change.
And so as one in relation to that, first thinking was that freshwater wetland sensitivity of the additional data collected there has that further data collected, has that had any impact on change to your design, but the design is not known yet. So
Yeah. So these limits, it is a bit of an iterative process. So when we started 8 years ago, the TM limits were higher. And then subsequently, when the advice was received from the ecological experts that that it can't be or whatever, can you reduce those? So that's why we are over here. So there's a bit of an iterative process and arrive at those limits.
So how do they get reduced? Can the plant be changed and modified, the design of it, to that extent?
To the extent that we want to have
Right, so you can't change any further than that.
That's almost limited technology in terms of technology.
So you're saying, sorry, you're saying that currently, based on current technologies, that this would be at the limit of.
That would be in terms of, so excluding reuse plants. Okay? There are, I can read the supportable reuse plant as well. But in terms of the sewage treatment, that would be almost the limit of technology. And we've mentioned that before, to keep putting going with the water.
Yes, I've just come to a point there on that, it's 9.1 of your concluding comments, when you refer to those treatment plants. And I just got a question, do they use or rely on an adaptive management plan or environmental management plan?
I don't know. I'm a treatment plant engineer, so I look at the plants, I just know about that.
Our understanding is that they don't.
You're going to speak up, sorry.
All about pressure bashing. Our understanding of pollution is that they don't have an adaptive management regime. They have a different discharge regime and they have different receiving environment. For exactly those reasons, they don't actually need it. So in most cases, ultimately the discharge is no, the Wastewater has massive pollution.
Yeah, thank you. Understood, Lisa, thank you very much. Yeah, just take 5. Pitch.
You have access to that.
Yes, yes, yes.